Okay.
Oh, yeah. No problem there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good. Test. Yeah, Mike's all good. So
Okay.
ready anytime. Yeah.
Good to go?
Yep, let's do it.
You can't hear the church bells.
I cannot.
Okay. Happy Easter, by the way. Okay.
That phrase is unfamiliar to me, but yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, welcome to the Tokyo Jazz Joints podcast, episode 107. This is the bottom half, or rather the top half, of our Tokyo Jazz Joints top 10 countdown. Forgot the top of the pops, but that's okay. The Tokyo Jazz Joints top of the pops, top 10 countdown. You're right, it has been a while. We've got 4 joints, but 2 each. No, 1 each. So 4 times 2 is 8. It's like Sesame Street again.
You're way off.
We've got four episodes left. We've got 2 joints each. That's a total of 8 joints. And today we're going to be talking about the number 4 spot in our top 10 countdown. We hope that you've listened to it from 10 down to 5. We talked last week about the incomparable Basie and Elvin. And so we're going to kick off today with our number 4 joints. James, before we get into that, I have to address something because you sent me a message earlier that said that you were getting wet up. And I just want to be clear that you're not either in the bath, because that could be very dangerous, or slathered in, I don't know, baby oil or some other kind of lubricant.
That's a very appealing image, actually. Did I send the message that said that? Hold on, I'm just going back to our...
Getting wet up.
Oh dear, yeah, that's an unfortunate autocorrect, isn't it? Getting wet up.
Interesting that your phone would autocorrect set to wet.
What can I say? Yeah, there's an image for your Sunday morning when you wake up with the church bells ringing.
Apologies
in Belfast.
to those of you who are listening to this on a Sunday morning. At least it's not Easter Sunday.
This episode's getting rated 18 plus. Then, yeah.
I'm going to avoid a "he has risen" joke. Anyway, right. Anyway, how are you today?
I'm great, man. I'm great. I'm excited to get into deeper into the countdown. Dealing with a slight dental matter here that's still unresolved, but by the time this is broadcast, I'll be back in fighting shape. So if I sound a little slurry on this episode, that's the reason. But I'm maintaining a steady intake of Bushmills and Bushmills soaked in a cotton that I've just put on the tooth. So that's been helping dull the pain. Yeah.
Okay.
Going old school there. Yeah.
I was going to say it's the 19th century again. Well, do keep us posted on that, and listeners, please do look out for the upcoming GoFundMe campaign for extensive dental treatment as a result of persistent alcohol abuse. Okay, so we're going to get straight into it. I'm going to kick off, James, because
I thought I was on the even side. Okay, yeah, let's do a little improv. It's jazz. Yeah, switch up the order a bit. Go for it.
Look,
I'm eager, yeah, because I've been trying to guess some of your last places, and I have a couple thoughts, but I couldn't really narrow down what I was going to bet on. So yeah, I'm ready for it. Let's do it.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine where yours are going to be, especially when you told me what the jazz guide you had you've got sitting on your desk today.
Oops.
Anyway, so my number 4 is a place. Actually, it was the first time I'd been to this region of Japan. Incredibly, despite living there for 20 years, not sure why. When I do look back on my time in Japan, I think, why did I not travel domestically more? But hey, that's how it goes. Anyway, so this place was in a city that I think was described to me by some people in the city as being sort of off the tourist trail. So this region of Japan, Shikoku, is one of the sort of 5, I guess, main islands, or certainly the 4 big islands, and then Okinawa as well as a group of islands. But where the city is located, the city of Kochi is located quite low down on that island. So I think what tends to happen is people go there to see the inland sea. They go to do this very famous pilgrimage, something equivalent to sort of the Camino, that type of walk around different temples. But actually, this city, I think, at least as it was described to me by some locals, is, it's kind of a bit further down. So you really got to make an effort to go there, and it's not maybe naturally on the tourist trail. So the place I'm talking about, of course, is the just absolutely incomparable for me, Mokuba. Now, we have been to many Mokuba. We've been to a Mokuba in Gunma. We've been to one in Kobe. There may even be others. But what I would say about this place is it was so good. I went twice on the same day. And I have to say, for me, Mokuba was just one of those places that if it's not already obvious, I think for me, the places that kind of transport you back to a certain time are the ones that really captivate my imagination. And I think for me, Mokuba in particular was one of those places. It just, when you step inside, so when we arrived in Kochi, I was with my partner, now wife, Julie, should clarify, and obviously not you. But I went to Mokuba, and, it's down an alleyway. It's in a nightlife type area. Feels, even in the daytime, feels a little bit rough and ready. And it's this very small door in this tiny little unit down this alleyway. And you step inside and you forget entirely that it is the daytime. And it's dark, it's low lit, it's very smoky. And there was a guy just there at 2 PM, just completely off his face, just having the absolute crack, just chatting away, shouting at the owner, just having the best time. And I just thought, this place is wild. All the fittings are the sort of fittings that we see in places like, Chigusa is the obvious one, these kind of very specific sort of leather PVC seats and sofas and coffee tables that you get in a lot of old kisa. There's bits and pieces around the wall. As you come in the door, there's kind of a hatch where the owner bangs out coffee and so on and changes the records. And it just was one of those places that I thought, this is absolutely incredible. And if you're not satisfied with that, what you then realize, if you chat to the owner, is there's actually an upstairs. So she took me to this upstairs, and we've talked about this on a previous episode, but upstairs there's a room which I would say seats 30 people. It's got kind of diner style seating, but all facing towards the front. There's a full space up there for a stage. It's got, a couple of faded black and white posters on the wall of jazz musicians. It's got this huge menu as you're coming up the stairs with all the kind of original prices of the drinks, and it says Mokuba. And believe it or not, they still have gigs up there. And Mokuba's been going, I think, for over 60 years now. And she said, oh yeah, we have gigs up here. And she said, it's the only time that I really worry about the place, because there's so much vibration from 30 people in a band playing upstairs that I genuinely worry that the ceiling is going to come in. And you can completely imagine it. It's this claustrophobic space. And I thought, and they have some posters up at the door of gigs and things. So it's obviously still used regularly as a gig space. And you just wonder, how on earth can you have a gig up here in 2025 or 23 or whenever I went? There's absolutely no regard for health and safety, and it must just be a very intense, very, very kind of visceral experience to be up there. But the whole place, everything about it, the furniture, the topography, the atmosphere, the owner, it blew me away. And it had one of those afternoons that I'll never forget, and actually came back in the evening to kind of say hello again, and just come in, rather than to photograph this time, just come in and sit for a drink. And I mean, again, the only difference is that when you come at night, the alleyway is dark, and so it's kind of lit by this beautiful red sign that says coffee and whiskey, Mokuba. And so for those reasons and many, many more, Mokuba is my number 4. That almost rhymes.
Fantastic pick. Fantastic. Yes. Mokuba, unfortunately not a place that we got to together, but yeah, I had been there. And it's funny. Well, I just want to, I have to start with your description of like going up the steps and the upstairs room, because I have the exact same impression. And I remember thinking like, because Kochi City is, if people look at the map of where it is in Shikoku, it's on the Pacific coast, and because it's quite far down south, but also like kind of sticking out a bit. I think it's a little bit more east than Kyushu. It gets pounded by typhoons every year. Okay. And a place like Mokuba, you'd think, okay, you've got all those like alleyways surrounding it, but like a really, really major typhoon could just slam right through that neighborhood, and just, those buildings don't look like they could stand up to it at all. So, and the other part being that Kochi is really, really famous for having, I think, the highest density of like drinking dens of anywhere in Japan. So when you're wandering around those alleyways at night, you totally nailed it about the impression. I mean, it is very drunk.
Yeah, I can feel that for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, Mokuba's amazing. I think the reason that I went there, so the time that I went to Shikoku, I was in Matsuyama, which is the other side of the island. And the inland seaside. And then somebody had said, well, Mokuba is the oldest jazz kissa in Shikoku, so you have to go there. And I was like, oh, okay. So changed the plan, got a bus over the mountaintop, arrived in Kochi, which is extremely tropical. Actually, I don't know if you remember, Philip, like when you get off at the station, there's just hundreds and hundreds of palm trees, like more than almost anywhere that you see, even in Okinawa. Right?
Yeah.
So it immediately gives you like, oh, okay, this feels different. I would imagine in the summer it's just baking there. I know that it gets like a lot of rain as well, but it just immediately feels different. It's a really historic place. It's, of course, the hometown of Sakamoto Ryoma, a really famous figure in Japanese history, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners know about. So he's everywhere. His statue, all the omiyage and the souvenirs you get have his face on it. But like, yeah, when you get, I actually took a taxi because I was doing a day trip there. So I didn't even stay for the night. It was a day trip, a bus over the mountains, and then I got a taxi to Mokuba. And I remember the lady telling me, like, she was like, oh, well, you're here too early in the day. Like, only half the places are open to drink. And I was like, well, first of all, half of them being open has still got to be in the high hundreds, right? And secondly,
it's quite a lot already.
Well, secondly, I was just sort of like, wait, what? Why do you assume that I'm here to drink? Like, was I just giving off the aura of like
probably just the general demeanor? I would say
the absolute stench of last night's jazz keys that maybe was still on me. But it was amazing. So apparently, so I was chatting with her, and she said that like, look, it is pretty famous because of all the local booze that they do make there as well, the jizake and the shochu and whatnot. So people do come on these sort of like, drinking and eating sort of like vacations for the weekend. Not too many people going to Mokuba. But I mean, yeah, I got there and I had the exact same impression. I had to wait around about 30 or 40 minutes before I could talk to the master, the mama-san, because it was actually pretty busy. And it was only about maybe 2 or 3 o'clock. And then once I started to talk to her, she was lovely. I mean, she showed me upstairs as well. She took over the place. She was actually, I've got in my notes, she was a customer. She's not the original owner, obviously. It was
I was scrabbling around in my notes there actually, because her name is Rika Yoshikawa. You're right, she was a customer. I was desperately trying to find the notes there, but apparently the master who started it died in his 50s, obviously quite young, and his sister took over, and then before she died, Rika-san took over as the mama. And she said, right. I have 2007. And her husband then, there's so many places and so many things, but I remember the husband then turning up. I think he was there in the evening. He's a jazz drummer. So
yes. Yoshikawa Eiji.
He's also an illustrator. So he gave me this beautiful, beautiful book of like little jazz illustrations that he had done as well. So it was just... really lovely, like genuinely lovely people, like no sort of initial kind of sniffiness or like, sounding you out or figuring out what you're at. It was just genuine, like welcoming, like come in, have a laugh, have a drink. And the sort of place that the owner, and it's sometimes hard. And we've been in a few places like that where it's kind of hard to discern who's customer and who are the owners and the staff. You know what I mean? Like at some point, I feel like every night it just ends up with a big table of people just having a drink.
Completely. And just people, and then everybody cleaning up together afterwards. Right. Exactly. A bit of like a Cabo vibe up in in Sendai,
yeah.
You know? Yeah. Totally feels that way. And I remember now because I've just been scrambling with the notes. So once you said like Kochi, I knew it was going to be that. So I was looking for my notes on it, and I had down because I went there in that weird sort of dead zone in COVID when Japan was still closed. So when I went down, I mentioned like the lady taxi driver. She also commented on it. She's like, "What are you doing here?" Basically, I was like, "No, I live in Japan." You know what I mean? And then so you said her name is Rika-san. I didn't have her name noted down, but Rika-san had said to me, she was like, "Oh, we don't really get a lot of like overseas tourists." And I was like, "Oh, well, jazz is not that popular." She's like, "No, I meant in Kochi." Kochi's more of a place that like Japanese people sometimes go for the history or for like, the drinking weekends or whatever, but it hasn't quite got, and maybe that's changed now with the huge Japan boom that's going on right now. I'd be interested to see, but it's kind of far enough away. And also Shikoku is the least visited of the four major islands by any tourists, Japanese or overseas. So I think that being Shikoku, being on the opposite side on the Atlantic Ocean, I don't think a lot of people go there. And so she was really, really happy that I was there. And when I explained that, oh, look, I go around checking all the jazz keys everywhere. And she was, oh, it's great. She was telling me about the history of the city and the jazz scene. And, it was really unfortunate because that night was a gig. And I can't remember if it was her husband, Yoshikawa-san, or not. But I wish, I should have just stayed. I'd already had my hotel in Matsuyama, and I felt like I had to get back. But Mokuba's an amazing, amazing place. And it's really, really cool when you think that, like, so she would be the third owner. And it's, what are we now, 63 years in? And so, they could easily.
Yeah, I just can't believe. I just can't believe, like, even looking at the pictures, I just can't quite believe that it was like over, like basically 3 years ago now. That's kind of wild to me. You mentioned the alleyway too. I think that, because we've talked at length about gentrification and buildings and et cetera. And I have a little bit more on that later before we log out. But that particular sort of drinking alleyway there that it's on, I couldn't see it really being redeveloped. It's kind of like separate. It's kind of its own separate neighborhood, I think, or it's just it's like the whole place would have to go. It's not like it's not like an area where, you could kind of, they're pretty good at that in Japan, but you couldn't kind of surgically remove, I think, certain, like it's either the whole area goes or not, but it's just, if you have one of I think it's the Samazama one, I think, but it might be the earlier one, but there's a Tokyo, if you have one of the Tokyo Jazz Joints zines from 23 or 24, you've got a couple of pictures of Mokuba in there. There's one that I love of just a fan in the toilet with a sort of canvas wall and this kind of ripped poster of a very idyllic seaside resort. It's just a very photogenic place, but also just a really lovely, beautiful place too. And one of the photographs that really stood out for me that I was able to take, which, links to what you're saying there about COVID, is there's an absolutely brilliant poster on the wall.
Yes, I have it.
Elvin Jones wearing a COVID mask and saying, please put on your mask. So it's great. It's just fantastic use of Photoshop.
Wonderful. I was dying when I saw that. That was hysterical. Because that trip, like I was wearing a mask on the bus, on the train, going into the shop. And it was funny because you go into Mokuba and the first floor is so narrow and cramped, right? And, Mama-san's wearing a mask, I'm wearing a mask, and sitting right next to me is a I wouldn't even say middle-aged, I would say older couple in their 70s, just chain smoking away, man. In the 20 minutes I was there, they just they had cigarettes lit the entire time and knocking back some drinks too at like 3 p.m. So it was very old school and just absolutely a great pick. I
also just one postscript actually. The other thing that I'd forgotten was, I think when I went back in the evening to just say hello and have a drink, I left my business card, which I can't remember if you've seen, but there's a photograph of my father in Trafalgar Square surrounded by pigeons in his school uniform. I just randomly, it's on my business card because when I was making some business cards, I found this dump of family photographs on my laptop, and I was like, oh, I'll use these. So there's one of my mum throwing a snowball, and there's one of my dad as a schoolboy in Trafalgar Square. But immediately it caused this whole like kerfuffle because they thought it looked like that famous Thad Jones cover, the magnificent Thad Jones album on Blue Note, where he's standing in Trafalgar Square in black and white with all these pigeons. So this was a great source of discussion. They're like, oh my god,
he's my dad, despite him being a black American guy. Yeah. That's great.
Anyway,
stuff.
so that's my number 4. So over to you then.
Yeah, great. No, great choice. And well, we're going for my 4th. So the last couple picks that I had were full of some of the kind of crazy stories, like, Suga-san up in Hirosaki and Aomori and his sort of like free jazz stuff and hanging with the art ensemble. And then we had, of course, like Mizuguchi-san and Saramanian and him being buds with Sonny Rollins, and then the unbelievable Elvin and Carlos-san with all his stories. For my 4th joint, we're going to be a little bit simpler. There's nothing too crazy about this place, but it's just, to me, one of the all-time, if you had to take someone, you could not describe it in words. You could have no conversation about what a jazz kissa was. You could only take the person there and let them experience for themselves. This would be one of my main choices. And it's another oldie, opened in either 1969 or 1971, depending on what you read online. And it's one of our favorites. We've been twice together, and I've been twice by myself. It's Jab in Fukuoka. And I think Jab is, for me, okay, so it's located in the Tenjin area. So it is like Chodo downtown Fukuoka. Really busy, but on a little side street near one of the small like river canals in Fukuoka. It's got one of the all-time beautiful awnings, this sort of maroon, dark red. It just says Jazz and Coffee Jab in white letters. Right away, you just know that, okay, this is going, I mean, as soon as the first time I saw it, I was like, there's no chance that I won't like this place. Now, Philip, I've done a bit of research after picking this. So we met Akiba-san, who is a very friendly, but rather kind of shy guy. We met him the times that we went. He is actually the second master. Okay, the guy who opened Jab, whose name I can't find in English, so it could be the Chinese characters could be Hanyu or Hanzhou. I'm really not sure what it is, but anyway, let's call him Hanyu-san. He was sort of one of like a main figure in the Kyushu jazz scene. Okay, he opened Jab in 1969, and I believe he was the senpai to our good friend Nakatomi-san from Brownie. So shout out to a good friend of the show, Jerome, who had written a little bit about that. And then I was reading about it in Japanese as well on Kame Blues' great jazz blog. Shout out to Kame Blues. He's been very helpful. So it was kind of like one of those places that it was one of the earlier ones. It was sort of like a bit of a Doug type vibe where people in Kyushu and in Fukuoka would hang out and then maybe go on to do, and some of them even open their own places like Nakatomi-san. And when you go in today, it still has that feeling. It's got that old red leather kind of like sofas, right? The glass ashtrays on the low tables, very Japanese. Like everything is very low. The counter is very low, The gigantic JBL speakers along the wall when you walk in. With just a tiny, the only sort of like accommodation to modern living is right above the JBL speakers, where in some places there might be an album or a photograph of like, a Thelonious Monk. This one has got a little white sign with a mobile phone with inside the slashed red Ghostbusters, like no mobile phones. That's all he has up on the wall right above the JBL. So, when you go in, it's like, oh, okay, this is old school, Sit down, get your drink in. A lot of people, the lunch menu, very, very famous. No need to go into my usual rant about the food. A lot of rice on that menu. A lot of rice on the menu. I don't believe you partook the days we were there.
Not a fan of omu rice. Never been a fan, I have to say.
But we do you remember the last time we went?
Very clearly,
You had already photographed it on the first time, so we didn't know if we could fit it in that day. We were running around. It was very busy, and we were both kind of like, you know what? We finished our delicious Fukuoka Hakata ramen, and we were like, I think we can spare half an hour. Let's just go. And we went in, and it was just magical as always. Jab is the kind of place I think that in the middle of the city, you would think, again, talking about this gentrification thing, you would think would be at risk. And yet he's busy enough, and that street is just enough removed from the main drag that I think that building will survive long term. The fact that now they have new ownership as well, they're on the third owner right now. And from everything I was reading earlier in the day on a lot of the Japanese jazzkisa, Twitter and Instagram, it seems busy as ever. People go there for lunch. People are not even like listening to the jazz. Like people who work in the area will go there for their curry rice or their rice for lunch. And so they're obviously making enough money to keep it open. And the music, I mean, what can you say? The gigantic JBL system, and he's got a whole wall of vinyl and CDs playing not just the old jazz too. Like last time we were there, he did play something a little bit current. So Jab for me, again, no wild and wacky stories, but just I think one of the purest jazz kisa. It kind of reminded me, and I know that this is a place that we went together, but I don't know if you really went back again. Do you remember Narcissus, of course, in Shinjuku, in Kabukicho?
Yeah.
And the lovely Yuko-san, Mama-san there. Jab is sort of like a Fukuoka version of there. It's just your standard late 60s jazz kisa that has weathered all the changes around it and maintains its absolutely pure environment. And I hope that, now that sadly Akiba-san, his health sort of declined and he's passed it on to someone else, hopefully they can keep it going because, it's just one of my all-time favorite spots. There's really, it's funny. I really was thinking about that because we ate a kind of a spicy Kyushu ramen that day. I've got it in my notes. And then we went for a coffee, which I usually don't do at afternoons. I usually don't drink any more caffeine after lunch. But I got one that was too early for a beer. And I've got in my... Hey, Jazz Kisa Hunter's got to be, you got to be said, man. I have in my notes it said that there is literally nothing I would change about this place, and there was nowhere else I would rather have a cup of coffee in the afternoon than Jab. So that's it. A bit of short commentary there, but I mean, for me, one of the purest, most beautiful kisa that you can imagine, and I know that a lot of our listeners who've gone down to, because Fukuoka is a popular place to visit, have been there, and pretty much everyone has had the same, glowing reviews of it. So
yeah, really interesting choice. Didn't see it coming at all, but totally understand why. Yeah, I mean, I think there was a real noticeable decline. Like we talked about it in a more recent episode, so you may have heard that one. And I think there was that. I love a metaphor, but I think there was a sort of very poignant kind of thing where he was making food and we were sat there, but the speaker kept going, and it was obviously looked at, and he had this sort of particular way of like just sort of jimmying at the volume control, and it was essentially the sort of audiophile's version of turn it on and off again, the IT sort of trope of turn it on and off again. And he had clearly very visibly aged, but I think what struck me was exactly what you said. I remember commenting on at the time that there was two guys there just in for their morning coffee in suits, like classic kind of salarymen, and just like chain smoking away. And just the idea, I think, at home, because here now, if you smoke, a lot of people vape, and if you don't vape and you still smoke, you stand almost exclusively, you stand in like a doorway or you stand outside a building. And just the idea of these two guys just on a work morning having their coffee, just smoking away,
it's just 10:30, 11 in the morning,
in this jazz place, which again, like you just wouldn't have here. It's kind of wild. And although it's a coffee shop there, equally, like we could have just ordered, a bourbon or a beer, or like it just doesn't matter. And so you just lose this sense of like space and time, and yeah, really interesting choice, but great place. And I'm glad we did pop back in, because it was kind of interesting just to see that progression of just the sort of continuity of the place, but obviously the kind of progression of the owner's age and ability to run somewhere like that. And
and also it's not, because we've seen and we've talked about several places that have had successors, or like the Hochigusa thing or supporters association, and to take over some of these classic old ones, and Jab would not have been one that I thought would have actually had that happen. I had gotten the impression because Akiba-san, I mean, he was the second owner, but he's been there for ages, right? And a lot of those records are his, all the old dishes, all the old magazines, and it was just sort of like, well, who's going to take this over? You know what I mean? To run this for 10 hours a day. But again, with the location, and like you said, like people coming in there to eat lunch, like I had the feeling that the times we've been there, like people just came in to eat. They weren't even necessarily jazz fans. You know, it was just like, okay, I work.
Oh no, it's very much like I think there's a young woman came in there the last time we were there as well.
Yes, right.
Like, again, off work and had ordered some really kind of sketchy thing that like you and I would be going. But she had that, and you know, again, she just looked like she was on her lunch, and and why not if you can sit in somewhere like that, all you know, putting.
Well, that's the thing is
smoke, you know.
Sadly, like a lot of what would used to have been very central jazz kisa, and this is not just Tokyo; it's all over the country. You know, they've seen better days, or they've closed. You know, they just couldn't keep up with redevelopment, the rent, the changing tastes, the loss of customers, or whatever. You know, so you know, I think we were talking offline about maybe a couple days ago, or whenever. But like, you know, when you look at the old jazz matchbooks, and you notice how many of them were like on Dogenzaka and Shibuya. And you're just like,
yeah,
like it was like 10 jazz kisa, you know, around these like alleyways back then, and they're all gone, you know. So it's like jab, like right in that like that busy Tenjin part of Fukuoka. You would think, oh gosh, I mean, there's no way that they can stay open, and yet they're there. They seem to be thriving. It's not like one of these places where the guy's just sitting there by himself all day. It's pretty busy, and so I'm really eager the next time I go down there to talk to the new owners. I was trying to find in Japanese somebody who's like spoken with them. But nobody said anything. The only entry I said was, I was sad to see old Master Akiba not there, but I got such a warm welcome from the new master that I felt at home. And I was like, okay, that's great. But you know, in Japanese, it's so vague. The new master, man, woman, old person, young person. You know what I mean? Like not a clue who it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, jab is definitely one we're going to have to get back to. But yeah, I really wanted to, I was really, it was torn between that and one other place that was sort of like my, like jazz kisa in quotation marks. You know what I mean? Like this is like the perfect example. But that's where we had to go. And yeah, I mean, Fukuoka as well, I've raved about it so many times. It's just one of the best cities in Japan. So.
Interesting. And it's strangely in sync, actually, in terms of just era and feel and vibe as well. So that was episode 107, our number 4 choices. And of course, now I think it's also interesting that even National Geographic deems the jazz kisa worthy of attention now, that you know, we very often hear about the same places, and it tends to be certain places time and time again. And I think it's kind of interesting, you know, places like Mokuba and Jab do remain largely under the radar, and you know, they're not getting that same attention, but yet there are so many places, as we know, right across the country that are just continuing to fly that flag, and persist and evolve and continue, and long may that be the case. And
long may they thrive.
I hadn't known about the succession plan for Jab, so that's wonderful to hear. Makes me think maybe we should, if we do make it down to that area, we should maybe try and pop in and say hello. But
I'm sure that pink payphone that's on the counter there still works. So I'll dig up the number.
Absolutely. Bring your 10 yen coins.
Before we go, and this will be old news by the time people are listening to this, but yeah, I mean, we mentioned, you know, I did even mention it earlier, but maximum respect and shout out to the great Doug, which unfortunately is fall victim to more gentrification in Shinjuku. Doug is closing. I think a lot of our listeners will have probably heard this news already from various social media. But again, that mysterious comment of "stay tuned for more news" indicates that maybe they're closing there, and maybe they're going to move. But yeah, I was shocked and saddened to hear they were closing, and also like not a place that we went because it's a club, but a place that I really grew up in the Tokyo jazz scene for many years. Body and Soul is also closing. The mama-san there, Kyoko-san, she's just like kind of a queen figure of like the Tokyo jazz scene. Philip, I remember I was interviewing Christian McBride at the Cotton Club before one of his gigs. And so I said, okay, so you got the gigs here. What else you got planned? He's like, oh, well, you know, after the show, I'm going to go down to Body and Soul. I'm like, wait, are you playing like a second gig, or is there a jam session? He's like, no. I just have to go down and pay tribute and, you know, say hi to Mama-san. That's what all the visiting jazz musicians call Kyoko-san at Body and Soul. They just call her Mama-san. And they all go to pay their respects because for 50, 60 years, she's been hosting overseas acts and promoting the jazz scene here. Just a legendary figure. And yeah, again, they're in Shibuya at their second location and they're closing. And it's probably unlikely they're going to be able to reopen because it's just too expensive. So yeah, another loss to the jazz scene here. But thankfully, at least we've got the good news about Jab and some other places.
Exactly.
That can keep going. So yeah, so there we are. All right, man.
That's it. So yeah, thanks for listening as ever. That was episode 107 of our Tokyo Jazz Joints Top of the Pops Top 10 Countdown. And we'll be back next week as we edge closer to the top spot with our number 3 picks. Until then, take it easy. Peace, love, and jazz. And James, I'll talk to you soon.
You bet.